This occurred several years ago, a few months after COVID began. I began working from home while my wife worked in human resources at a local supermarket company. We had a daughter together who was 7 at the time. I was sitting at my desk in the living room downstairs, and my daughter had been out of school for a few minutes, so I could hear her playing upstairs. I have home security cameras connected to an app on my phone that allows me to see a live feed, but I never feel the need to use them since I trust my daughter to be paying attention in school. In addition, my job may be really demanding at times, and I find it difficult to shift my focus on most days. My daughter comes downstairs to get some snacks, and I assure her I'll be finished in a few hours. She returns upstairs, and everything is normal. I'm in the middle of writing a report when I hear my daughter speak, which isn't unusual until I hear a faint voice respond. I knew it wasn't my daughter's voice because it sounded like a man. I sat there in shock for a few seconds, trying to figure out whether I was hallucinating and it was one of my co-workers, but I swear the voice came from upstairs. I excuse myself from the Zoom call and head upstairs to my daughter's room. I knocked, and she told me to come inside. I questioned what she was doing, and she responded she was simply playing with her iPad. When I questioned who she was talking to, she replied, "I don't know." That wasn't an unusual response for my daughter, as she usually answers, "I don't know," to anything she doesn't want to talk about. I didn't think much of it, but I still felt nervous. I quickly checked around the room and didn't notice anyone or anything out of place, so I returned to work and that was all. The remainder of the day was very routine. My wife arrived home, we ate supper, played some games with our daughter, and then it was time for bed. I debated telling my wife throughout the day because I had no idea what I had heard, and I kept telling myself that it could have been one of my co-workers, another voice from one of their screens, or even the game my daughter was playing on her iPad. I had no reason to suppose there was anyone else upstairs because I could see her room from my workstation and walked up to check. I determined that if I heard anything else, I'd notify my wife, but I didn't want to alarm her for no cause. We each tucked our daughter in and said goodnight before retiring to bed. That night, I had horrific dreams and kept drifting in and out of sleep, hearing voices and feeling pressure on many regions of my body, akin to sleep paralysis. Maybe in these phases of being somewhat awake, I can almost hear a male voice speaking, but I can't make much sense of what he's saying. I woke in a state of terror as I noticed the sun was rising. I realized my wife was already awake and getting ready for work. "Did you hear anything last night?" I asked her and she said, "No," which relieved me. She inquired why, and I told her that I thought I just had some strange form of sleep paralysis that I'd never had before. She made sure I was okay before logging her kid into school for the day and leaving. I prepared for work myself because I only had approximately an hour to eat breakfast, shower, and try to forget last night's nightmare. It's Friday, and I'm ready for the weekend. The day moves as slowly as humanly possible, and I can hardly remain awake. I dozed off for a few minutes during my break before hearing my daughter walk downstairs. She asked if she could go outside, and I answered, "Not until I'm off work." She's plainly upset, but she understands the rules. I finished the last hour of work and head upstairs to check on her. I knocked on her door, and she opened it with a book in hand. "Did you still want to go outside?" I responded. She said, "No, not anymore," and stated that she only wanted to read. I felt a sense of relief because I didn't want to do anything anyway because I was exhausted. I went back downstairs and switched on the television. My wife wasn't going to be home for another half hour, so I had time to nap. Because it was a Friday, I knew she'd want to stay up late because we both had weekends off, and our kid usually goes to bed by 8 or 9, so it was pretty about the only alone time we'd get. I dozed off for a while before being woken up by my wife entering through the front entrance. She said hello, and our daughter ran down to hug her. The rest of the night goes by. We have supper, watch a movie, and play some games before taking our daughter in. My wife and I stayed up until around midnight, which is a record for us, so the snooze came in handy. I climbed into the bed, ready to fall asleep. My wife and I had been lying there for a bit, and as I was about to fall asleep, she asked me a question. She asked whether someone had been here earlier, and I, slightly alarmed, responded no before asking her why. She added that when she pulled into the driveway, there was a car parked at the curb directly outside our house, and they sped away as soon as she pulled in. I informed her that no one had stopped by, and I had made it very plain to everyone that no one was allowed over because we were trying to maintain a social distance due to the start of COVID. She waited there for a few seconds before saying it was probably just the neighbors, and she thought she saw the same car there on Monday and possibly last week as well. She quips that I shouldn't have any women over, and we finally go to bed. Thankfully, I slept soundly that night. Saturday passed without incident. It wasn't until Sunday that my daughter began to cause me concern. We were eating supper when she suddenly asked us what a machete was. I looked across at my wife, who seemed just as concerned as I was. My mind is racing, trying to recall whether we'd seen or spoken anything concerning weapons, but I can't think of anything. My wife asks her in a calm tone where she learned that word. She says she forgot, and I can't help but feel like she lied there in front of us. Something wasn't right about this, and she is a lovely kid who never lies. If something was wrong, you'd let us know, right? I asked, hoping she'd open up a little bit, but she declined and told us that everything was fine. She said she'd made a good friend, her teacher was pleasant, and online school was going well. I felt mixed emotions, almost hating myself for wanting anything was wrong so she could just tell me. I opted to respect her boundaries, as did my wife. Nothing else was discussed for the remainder of the night. My wife and I put our daughter to bed and returned downstairs to sit on the couch. I had this dreadful feeling in my belly that had been brewing all night and pretty much all week. So I decided to just tell my wife everything, from the voice I believed I heard to the dream and the machete. My daughter has been spending more time in a room than usual. She had been wanting to be around me and her mother since COVID began. She was an only kid who could only see her pals through a screen, so it seemed natural that she would want to spend time with us. But now, spending so much time alone seemed weird. I tell my wife everything I'm feeling. I suppose I vented for around 20 minutes because there was so much on my chest. She glances at me with a blank stare before looking down, and I can tell she is feeling something similar. She looks up at me and bursts into tears before she can say anything else. I hug her for a bit as we sat there, and getting everything out had left my thoughts blank. But then I hear it again, a voice coming from my daughter's room, the same voice I believed I had heard previously. I spring up from the sofa, not even considering my wife's reaction, and rush up to my daughter's room, swinging the door open. And there she is, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at me in terror as if I was the one invading on her and her friend, not the other way around. I was afraid and anxious, so I yelled, "Who's there?" There was no response. I yelled at my wife to call the cops while I was searching my daughter's room. I look under her bed, in her closet, and under mounds of stuffed animals and find nothing. I checked the window to see if anyone was down there, but there was no one. This didn't make sense, and then I heard my wife ask my kid a question that completely turned my world upside down. Is it coming from the camera? When I turn around, my daughter gives a timid nod. The camera. My apprehension turns to wrath as I demolish a stool. I tried to remain calm so as not to terrify my daughter, but the thought of some stranger speaking to her through a camera I willingly set in her room was unbearable. I was furious, disgusted, and heartbroken when my doorbell rang and a man yelled, "Police." I answer the door and explain everything to them, but they do not appear astonished at all. They added that this occurs frequently when security cameras lack several of the security measures seen in more expensive models. Apparently, hackers can see through it and even communicate with you, which was obviously new to me. They asked to talk with my daughter, and what she told them was heartbreaking. This had been going on for about 2 weeks, and the voice had become my daughter's buddy. They talked to her after school and questioned her about everything she enjoyed, and they told her that they liked the same things. This voice learnt when I got off work, when my wife arrived home, and pretty much everything about our family schedule. They discovered about my daughter's school schedule, her friends' names, how she hadn't seen them in a while, and how she felt lonely and as if she no longer had any friends. This voice had been learning everything about my kid right in my own home, right under my nose. They preyed on her loneliness and utilized it to their advantage. Everything was starting to make sense. The voice I heard was real, and the dream I had about the voice wasn't a dream at all. And this made me wonder if my daughter's desire to go outside was simply to play with this stranger, implying that my wife was correct about the car outside our house, the one that was there on Friday, Monday, and last week. I just realized a few days ago that I had been talking to my daughter in that voice for 2 weeks. I felt sick to my stomach, wondering why she wouldn't tell us, why she felt compelled to protect him. The officer asked the same question, and my daughter remained silent for a moment before he told her that everything would be fine. She claimed that the voice informed her that their friendship had to be kept secret and just between them, and that if she told anybody about it, someone would hurt him with a machete and they would never be able to communicate or play again. I looked at my wife, who is understandably shocked, and I know she feels just as guilty as I do. The police officer promises my daughter that no one will be wounded and that she should not be concerned, then motions me over to the side while his partner, my wife, consoles her. The officer's countenance is much more anxious than before. He adds that in the past, when they've had these types of calls, they've been pranks and nothing malicious has come of it. But this time is different, and they want to take precautions. He tells us to take down all of the cameras, and due to COVID, to stay at a family member's house or in a different hotel room for a few days while they patrol the area and seek for a car that matches the description my wife provided. After that night, my brother took us in for a couple of weeks, and we communicated with the police for a few months, but nothing came of the incident. It took some time for me to feel comfortable in my own home again after that, and I know my wife feels the same way. But we're both relieved that our daughter is unaware of the true intents of the man behind the voice, and we probably won't tell her until she's much older.